dare I say, party behaviors to augment my frustrations. And then I think my voice was also suffering. I think everything started to suffer for me.
Steve Perry finally confesses why he left Journey, and it's not what you thought. He walked away from the band at the height of their fame. For years, fans blamed his ego, but the truth involves a $75 million tour he refused, a promise to a dying woman, and a secret that destroyed him. In 1987, Perry couldn't even listen to music without panicking. He called it PTSD. His mother had just died, his voice was damaged, and then his bandmates did something that broke his heart. Now, at 75, Perry's confession reveals what really happened behind closed doors. Steve Perry was born on January 22, 1949, in Hanford, California. Back then, Hanford was a small farming town with about 8,000 people. His father, Raymond Pereira, was one of thousands of Portuguese immigrants who had come to California's Central Valley between 1900 and 1960. Most of them came from the Azores Islands, hoping to escape poverty. In Hanford, nearly 1 out of every 3 families was Portuguese. They spoke the language at home, held on to their traditions, and built a tight community. Raymond didn't follow the usual path of farm work. He landed a job at a local radio station. For an immigrant with limited English, this was extraordinary. Every day, he was surrounded by music, from country to rhythm and blues. That house, filled with Portuguese chatter and American radio, became a strange mix of cultures. But for young Steve, it was magic. He soaked in every sound, every rhythm, without realizing he was shaping a voice that would one day reach millions. When Steve turned 12, everything fell apart. His parents divorced in 1961. The family, once stable, was suddenly thrown into chaos. There were shouting matches, court dates, and long nights of fear. Steve felt it all. He blamed himself. His mother, Mary Korsma, saw the pain in her son. One day, with only $20 to her name, she spent it on a gold eighth-note pendant. She told Steve it would guide him, that music would be his way out. He wore that pendant every day for the next 25 years. Even in surgery, he refused to take it off. Before every high note with Journey, he'd touch it without thinking. That small piece of gold wasn't just jewelry, it was his anchor. A year later, when he was 13, Steve almost gave up completely. The family was driving through the Central Valley in their old 1956 Buick Special. It was hot. Steve sat in the back seat, overwhelmed by the thought of running away, or worse. Then the radio played a song, Sam Cooke's Cupid. Just 3 minutes and 24 seconds long, but in that moment, it felt like time stopped. Steve felt something powerful, something electric. He later said it was the moment he knew he was meant to sing. That song wasn't even a big hit anymore, it had peaked months earlier. But a DJ named Cowboy Joe Hernandez just happened to pull it from a stack of 45s. That one random choice may have saved Steve Perry's life. His mother eventually remarried. In 1963, Steve had a new stepfather, Marv Rotman, a tough construction foreman who believed in hard work. At just 14, Steve was carrying 60-pound bags of cement and using power tools on job sites. He even worked at Sila's Turkey Ranch, processing over 800 turkeys a day, 12-hour shifts at $1.15 an hour. His hands grew thick with calluses. His spine curved from the strain. But all of it built something inside him, a stubbornness, a fire. Even when Journey started touring, Steve still picked up construction jobs between shows. He wasn't pretending to be a working-class hero. He was one. And when he sang about love, pain, and struggle, people believed him, because he'd lived it. His family's original name was Pereira. It meant pear tree in Portuguese. But immigration officers at Ellis Island changed it, like they did with so many other names. So Pereira became Perry. But his roots never left him. Portuguese culture is filled with a feeling called saudade, a deep, aching mix of longing and hope. You can hear it in Steve's voice in songs like Faithfully and Open Arms. There's more than just melody, there's emotion, real and raw. Growing up, Steve spoke Portuguese until he was 8. The rhythm of that language, the music of his childhood, quietly shaped the way he sang. When he got older, Steve moved to Sacramento. He formed a band called Ice with a young musician named Scott Matthews. In 1972, they recorded at the famous Record Plant Studios in Los Angeles. Right next door, Stevie Wonder was working on Talking Book. Imagine that, Steve Perry, unknown and struggling, laying down tracks while Stevie created a classic. But Ice didn't make it. They had no manager. Matthews was still in high school. Their songs, though full of promise, disappeared into silence. It was a bitter taste of what almost was. Then came Pieces. In 1975, Steve formed a new band with rock veterans like Tim Bogert from the Jeff Beck Group. It felt like the breakthrough, but it wasn't. 18 months of hard work and still no record deal. The band fell apart. Once again, Perry was left with nothing. He even auditioned. It was Walter Herbie Herbert. He was looking for a singer for a band called Journey. It was 1977, and Journey's future looked grim. They had toured hard and opened for huge names like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Santana, but after 3 albums, the numbers just weren't good enough. Columbia Records was losing patience. Either Journey found a new lead singer or the label would drop them. Then, out of nowhere, came a demo tape. It was handed to Herbie by producer Scott Matthews. One track stood out, If You Need Me, Call Me, a raw, emotional performance by a singer from a little-known band called Alien Project. The voice belonged to Steve Perry. That name rang a bell. Herbie remembered a conversation with his associate Jackie Villaina. Jackie once mentioned a guy named Larry Luciano whose cousin Steve was a pretty good singer. Herbie put the pieces together, this was him. But Perry wasn't chasing fame anymore. After losing his bassist Richard Michaels in a car crash, he'd given up music and returned to Lemoore, California. He was working construction and even spent time on a turkey farm, just trying to move on. When Herbie called, it was Perry's mother who convinced him to try one last time. It was a desperate move. Columbia's deadline was looming. This unknown singer could either save Journey or end it all. Herbie didn't just throw Perry into the spotlight. He pulled off a bold and bizarre trick. Since Journey still had Robert Fleischman on vocals and no contract to easily fire him, Herbie came up with a cover story. He brought Perry on tour as Roi John Villanueva's Portuguese cousin. It wasn't just a white lie, Perry was Portuguese, and this fake identity allowed him to blend in. While Fleischman sang during soundchecks, Perry watched from the sidelines, quietly learning every note. Fleischman had no idea. He thought he was still Journey's frontman. But behind the scenes, Perry was preparing. The pressure was enormous. He was sneaking around, hiding his real role, all while rehearsing for a job that wasn't technically his. Perry later described it as walking on thin ice. He had no idea if the band would even accept him once the truth came out. That moment came in Long Beach. It was a regular soundcheck, or so everyone thought. Fleischman stepped away, and Perry stepped up. No warning, no plan, just raw instinct. He sang with Journey for the first time, right there on stage. The band stopped in their tracks. His voice cut through the air, full of emotion and range. It changed everything. Neil Schon, Journey's guitar hero, had always been the center of attention. Now he had competition. After that soundcheck, Herbie didn't wait. He told the band Steve Perry was their new lead singer. It was a risky call, but it had to be made. Columbia was ready to pull the plug. That one performance saved the band's contract and their future. The real test came on October 28, 1977, in San Francisco. Perry's first official show with Journey was met with confusion and anger. Fans were loyal to the old sound. Perry brought something new, smoother, more pop. Some fans booed. Others walked out. In Paris, someone threw a flash cube at his eye. He could have been blinded. Perry was shaken. Each night, he walked on stage knowing that half the crowd didn't want him there. Even the band was unsure. Greg Rowley said Perry sounded too much like a crooner. Sean wasn't thrilled about sharing the spotlight. Perry felt like an outsider, constantly having to prove himself. But he didn't quit. Then came Infinity in 1978. The pressure was brutal. Columbia's president gave them a clear goal: sell 1 million copies or else. Perry didn't just show up, he delivered. The album kicked off with Lights, originally about Los Angeles, but Perry rewrote it for San Francisco. That change marked his full embrace of the band's identity. They hit the road for a massive tour, 298 shows in 1 year. Perry's big moment came in a small pizza joint. He spotted Wheel in the Sky on a jukebox, slipped in 2 quarters, and played it without telling Sean. When the song came on, Sean lit up. It had arrived. The album slowly gained traction. Lights only hit number 68 on the charts, but fans connected with it. Journey was back, and Perry was now at the heart of it. By 1981, they were broke and burned out. Then came Escape, recorded at Fantasy Studios. The album would become their biggest ever. Perry poured his own life into the lyrics. Don't Stop Believin' came together in just 3 takes. That first line, just a small town girl, wasn't fiction. It was him, isolated, famous, but lost. The song exploded. Over 7 million digital copies sold. The album stayed on the charts for 165 weeks and sold over 12 million worldwide. But here's the twist: Perry hated it at first. He thought it was too simple and tried to leave it off the album. That near miss almost cost the band their legacy. Then came Open Arms. Perry wrote it alone, heartbroken, on a $200 Casio keyboard at 3 a.m. His relationship with Sherry Swafford was falling apart. They sold out 67 straight shows in Dallas. They played 5 nights in a row, something even Elvis hadn't done. They were pulling in $500,000 a night. In 1984, Steve Perry did something that shocked everyone. He released a solo album called Street Talk while still being the frontman of Journey. At first, it seemed harmless. Other members were also exploring side projects. Guitarist Neil Schon started a supergroup with Sammy Hagar. Drummer Steve Smith focused on jazz. But Perry's solo album didn't just succeed, it exploded. It sold over 2 million copies in the US alone. The hit single, Oh Sherry, reached number 3 on the charts. That changed everything. Inside Journey, the mood was growing worse. Bandmates saw Sherry Swafford as a distraction. She reportedly caused problems during tours. Perry began flying separately, he was no longer part of the team. During the Separate Ways video shoot, she clashed with Perry over the actress cast. She wanted someone less attractive. Later, Perry ignored everyone's advice and cast Swafford in the Oh Sherry video. A producer warned him, "One day you won't be together." That day came fast. Journey went on hiatus after Frontiers. When they returned in 1986 with Raised on Radio, Perry was in charge. Guitarist Jonathan Cain said it was the happiest Perry had been, because Swafford wasn't around. Her absence may have saved the tour, but the band's unity was long gone. As Perry juggled Journey and his solo career, the pressure built up. He was producing albums, writing, recording, touring, and dealing with his mother's illness. She died in December 1985. Perry had to keep flying back and forth from the studio to visit her. He later said that losing her broke him. She had always been his biggest supporter. Her death left a hole that nothing could fill. By 1987, Perry had enough. He met with Schon and Cain and told them he was done. He couldn't take the pressure. He was burned out. Touring hurt his voice. He felt like he was damaging the one thing that made him special. After that final show, he disappeared from the spotlight. He couldn't even listen to music for years. He described it as a PTSD thing. Music made him anxious. From 1987 to 2018, he didn't release a single album. No concerts. No public appearances. He vanished. Fans wondered if they'd ever hear from him again. Then came the unexpected. In 1996, Journey reunited with Perry to release Trial by Fire. And against all odds, the album was a hit. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and quickly went platinum. The lead single, When You Love a Woman, became a radio favorite, climbing to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earning the band their first Grammy nomination in over a decade. Critics were stunned. This was the era of grunge and alternative rock, when bands like Nirvana and Alanis Morissette ruled the charts. Journey wasn't supposed to matter anymore. But Perry's voice still had magic. In fact, vocal coaches said his range had actually improved after his long break. The album pulled in more than $50 million. Journey wasn't just back, they were back on top. That success, though, came at a terrible price. After the album's release, Perry flew to Hawaii to rest and think. The pressure was building around the band's next big step, a world tour. He wanted space. On the island of Kauai, he set off on the Kalalau Trail, an 11-mile stretch of cliffs and jungle famous for its danger and beauty. Then disaster struck. During a sudden downpour, Perry slipped on wet volcanic rock and fell. The injury shattered part of his hip. Doctors later found out he also had a degenerative condition that had been quietly worsening for years, likely caused by decades of energetic performances. The damage wasn't minor. It was the kind of injury that could end a career. And for Steve Perry, it almost did. Back home, the band waited. For 17 months, nothing happened. From December 1996 to May 1998, Journey was stuck. Trial by Fire was still selling. Radio stations were playing their songs. Fans were begging for a tour. But no one knew if Perry would ever fully recover. While Journey sat still, other bands from their era were making a fortune. The Eagles and Fleetwood Mac were selling out arenas and earning millions per night. Journey, meanwhile, turned down more than 200 tour offers. One deal alone would have brought in $75 million. But Perry's doctors had no answers. Some said he might heal in 6 months. Others said he might never tour again. That uncertainty drained the band, both emotionally and financially. Things came to a head in early 1998. The band met at guitarist Neil Schon's studio in Mill Valley. It was a 4-hour meeting that turned into a turning point. Schon and keyboardist Jonathan Cain had done their research. They presented Perry with data showing that hip replacement surgery had a 95% success rate. They even mentioned musicians like Bo Diddley, who had returned to performing after the same procedure. They laid out an 18-month timeline to get Perry healed and ready for a world tour. But then they dropped the bomb. They had already He even offered to give up his stake in the business. He would become just an employee if that meant keeping the band whole. He spoke about Journey as a single piece of stone. Breaking stone ruins its wholeness, he said. But Sean and Kane had already made up their minds. They felt the fans deserved to hear the songs live, with or without Steve Perry. And just like that, it was over. Steve Perry had been out of the spotlight for nearly 20 years when something unexpected pulled him back into the world. It wasn't music. It wasn't fame. It was love. In 2011, filmmaker Patty Jenkins asked Perry to contribute to a documentary about breast cancer survivors. One of the women featured was Kelly Nash, a 41-year-old psychologist who had already beaten cancer once. She was smart, full of life, and had this calm strength that Perry couldn't ignore. He hadn't been in a serious relationship for years. He barely left his home. But something about Kelly broke through that wall. Their first conversation lasted until 4 o'clock in the morning. Perry later said it felt like talking to someone who understood his soul. That night changed everything. Suddenly, the man who'd been alone for decades was flying back and forth between California and Minnesota just to be near her. He was falling in love. They had 18 months of happiness before the nightmare returned. In December 2012, doctors told Kelly that her cancer was back, and this time, it was aggressive. They gave her about 14 months to live. Perry, who had once run from emotional pain, now found himself sitting beside her during long treatments, holding her hand through every battle. He spent over $200,000 trying to save her, flying her across the country to the best doctors and hospitals. When she was strong enough, they traveled together. They went to the Greek islands. They visited Hanford, Perry's hometown. They checked off every dream they could. Kelly took over 3,000 photos so Perry would have memories. Their love burned bright and fast, like they both knew time was slipping away. On December 14, 2014, Kelly's time ran out. She was in a hospital bed in San Francisco, her body failing. She asked Perry for one last promise. "Don't go back into hiding," she whispered. "Don't stop singing. The world still needs your voice." It broke him, but he said yes. He gave his word. Kelly wasn't even a Journey fan when they met. She loved Steve, not the stage version of him, but she believed in his voice. She secretly recorded him singing around the house. She even wrote him letters to read after she died. In one, she told him not to let grief silence him. She said hiding his voice was selfish. Perry kept those letters for years, reading them when the pain was too heavy. Eventually, her words pushed him back into the studio. In 2018, Perry released Traces, his first solo album in 24 years. It wasn't just an album, it was a love letter. He spent more than $3 million of his own money making it. He called it audio therapy. The opening track, No Era Sin, was written entirely about Kelly. You can hear her laugh in the background, recorded from their home videos. Perry's voice cracks with real emotion. He didn't care about perfection anymore. This was personal. The album debuted at number 6 on the Billboard 200. It sold 180,000 copies in its first week, even though Perry did almost no interviews or promotion. He also announced that 40% of the album's profits would go to cancer research in Kelly's name. By 2020, that number had already passed $2 million. Inside the album, the dedication read, "For Kelly, who made me promise." 3 years before Traces, another major moment quietly unfolded. In April 2017, Perry joined his old bandmates at Journey's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. It was his first time appearing with them in over a decade. When he stepped onto the stage at Brooklyn's Barclays Center, people didn't know what to expect. But Perry was warm, gracious, even emotional. He looked directly at guitarist Neil Schon and said, "I love the way you play. That's what brought me to Journey." Then he turned to the band's current singer, Arnel Pineda, and told him, "I love you. You sing with all your heart." It wasn't a performance, it was closure. For the first time in decades, Perry didn't run from his past. He honored it. And that past had evolved. Back in 2007, Journey found Arnel Pineda on YouTube. He was in the Philippines singing Journey covers with a local band. Neil Schon emailed him out of the blue. Pineda thought it was a scam, but he flew to the US, auditioned, and by February 2008 he was singing to 25 million viewers at a music festival in Chile. He did 57 concerts in that first year alone. Critics said his voice sounded just like Perry's, but his energy was his own. Perry never tried to compete with Arnel. In fact, his support at the Hall of Fame ceremony gave Arnel the blessing he never asked for, but deeply deserved. Journey had moved on.